Tell me honestly, have you ever seen an old fish? I mean really old? I have. Here it is. Wait, no, that's it in its prime. Yep, this is more like it. As you can see, the aging process looks similar to what humans go through. But not all fish are that lucky. Anyone who's been on the coast at least once has probably seen birds eating sea fish. They do it all the time. Catching a large amount of fish, they get help from fishermen, who also reduce the fish population. Don't forget other fish, larger and more predatory. So there's a logical question. Can fish actually die of old age, or are they doomed to be eaten? I think that some large predatory fish can, in theory, live long enough to die from old age. As for the smaller fish lower in the food chain, do they even stand a chance? Maybe, or at least they did have a chance. Today, there are not just fewer fish in the world's oceans. The number of old fish has decreased catastrophically. A study of fisheries in the seas around the U.S. and Europe found that populations of aging fish have declined by an average of 72%. For some species, this figure even reached 95%. Needless to say, this is bad. And of course, people and their active fishing are to blame for this. Don't forget about birds and other fish that need to eat, and you'll see an incredible reduction of the old individuals in the oceans. Meanwhile, they are the largest creatures there. They produce the most offspring and are best adapted to environmental changes. Marine fish dying of old age can only be seen in an aquarium these days. Both scientists and experienced aquarists agree on this. And the latter know exactly what such a death looks like. It always happens in the same manner, and it looks quite sad. Somewhere around the last couple weeks of a fish's life, it begins to move much more slowly, but doesn't show any signs of illness. It just gradually loses interest in food, and in a few days, it stops eating altogether and may rest in a corner all the time. In the end, other fish, if they're nearby, begin to pester the old creature and nip at it, and soon it stops resisting them. Its fins become torn and spots may appear since the immune system is no longer functioning. In the end, the fish becomes very lethargic and dies. It sounds very sad. And now I will also show you a very common example of aging. This is a betta fish, a popular fish among fish keepers. It's a very aggressive but very beautiful species. Their bright colors make it easy to identify their age. Like all living beings, they begin to lose their splendor towards the end of their lives. In captivity, betta fish live on average only about 2 to 3 years, and some even live up to 5. At first, it's quite difficult to notice color changes because they occur gradually, but the closer a betta fish is to the end of its life, the paler it becomes. It's as if it started going gray. The fins become thinner, sometimes even drooping. The fish starts to look, well, like an old lady. However, wait, Steve has something to say. What is it? Oh, got it. Okay. Steve said that fish actually have 3 types of aging. Lampreys, eels, and Pacific salmon age fast and die rapidly at first spawning. And when I say rapidly, I mean it. Take salmon, for example. These fish end up on the verge of death right when they travel to spawning grounds. While they swim in the ocean, everything's fine. But then the moment of reproduction comes, and the salmon rush upstream the river to get to the spawning spot. At this moment, the fish stop eating. Well, they simply have no time for this, because all the time and all the energy are focused on moving towards the goal. The body starts to shut down, and the salmon is actually rotting alive. Yes, this is how they age, and it results in death after spawning, because the fish doesn't have any strength left. Guppies, medaka, snakeheads, and many other fish have a completely different aging mechanism. They age gradually, like in general most other vertebrates, including humans. By the way, the same is true for the betta fish, which I mentioned earlier. I think this is the most common type of aging. In any case, if we rely on the information that researchers have today. And finally, there's the third type of aging found in rockfish, flatfish, paddlefish, and sturgeon. I would call it, nobody knows how these fish get old. Apparently, this is a very, very slow process, which is so negligible it's difficult to notice it. These fish live really long, especially by fish standards, and this makes research difficult. Also, some species never change over time, and young individuals look exactly the same as old ones. How can we figure it out? One of the most interesting examples of aging is found in lake trout, which has been studied in the so-called experimental lakes area in Ontario, Canada. These isolated reservoirs have been turned into an open-air biological lab, so the conditions there are perfect. Scientists have been working in these lakes since 1968, studying the properties of lake trout. Imagine their surprise when it turned out that for decades, they'd been catching the same individual fish. Lake trout mature very slowly and can live even for 50 years. But they have another feature: they never stop growing. While many organisms reach their maximum size and their prime at the same time, lake trout only get bigger every year. While the rest of the fish are really getting old, these ones, well, they're like a fine wine. The older the trout, the larger it is, and the more chances it has for successful reproduction, because age doesn't affect their reproductive functions. The larger size of the fish is also helpful. When you're huge, there's simply no one to eat you, which means no one will stop you from leaving offspring. What could possibly be cooler and weirder than a fish that, instead of aging, is becoming increasingly more enduring? Only a fish that outright refuses to age. The bigmouth buffalo is a fish species that lives in the fresh waters of North America. These fish can live up to 112 years. I repeat, 112 years! I'm not talking about some huge shark from the super cold seas, but about a fish that's about 4 feet long. This creature really doesn't age. The researchers selected 240 individuals from 2 to 102 years old and studied some of their vital indicators. Turned out that the older the bigmouth buffalo got, the greater their immunity was. And some of their other indicators improved every year. That is, these fish don't just keep growing to become larger than their predators, like trout. They sort of age backwards? Sort of like the curious case of Benjamin Buffalo. But if there are animals that essentially turn back time, why does everyone else on our planet inevitably grow old and die? Well, with rare exceptions like very primitive organisms and immortal jellyfish. That's a story for another time. Well, unlike lake trout, most animals don't keep growing endlessly. They can't get so big no one can harm them. Besides, most of the animals have evolved in the world not free of predators. And if you can become prey at any moment, nature had to rush things. Managed to do your job while you were young and healthy? Well done. And if you didn't, sorry buddy, but you're not a lake trout. As we age, many of our bodily functions start to malfunction. Our vision deteriorates, we get tired faster, move more slowly, it's getting harder to think. Everything changes from speed of reaction to the way you move, from the perception of taste to memory. These are obvious things that everyone noticed to some extent. For example, in her old age, my grandmother's cooking, let's say, is not what it used to be, but at the same time, she doesn't feel any difference. I think the reason is that the taste buds are gradually getting numb, and you can no longer feel subtleties. And as you probably realize by this point, we should thank evolution for all these bonuses we get as we age. For a long time, scientists didn't understand the logic behind the process, but it seems like they do now. Here's what I mean. As I said, for most organisms, the natural world is dangerous, and there are unbelievably many opportunities to die by accident. Predators, diseases, accidents, rivals. It means that in natural populations, most individuals die before they have time to grow old. Accordingly, evolution simply doesn't see the point in allowing us to see well, run fast, and produce offspring for a long time. Why would it when we in fact have to die? In addition, the power of natural selection seems to decrease with age. If a creature doesn't live long, who cares about the diseases that appear with age? That's why we have so many age-related conditions. Natural selection can't get rid of them because it simply doesn't see them. It's weird. But can we somehow show evolution that not everything went according to plan here? What if we can cheat death? Alas, no matter what we come up with, the human body has a limit. And it is 150 years. Seems like a lot. Nevertheless, a study published on May 25, 2021 in the Nature Communications states that after 120 to 150 years, the human body completely loses the ability to recover from disease and injury. Every year, such recovery takes more and more time, and eventually the body simply loses this ability. You can say it gets tired of fighting and dies. Of course, we're talking about mathematical modeling here, but it's based on the medical records of more than 500,000 people. In short, we can trust these calculations until scientists can prove the opposite. In any case, in order to live to 150 years old, you need to avoid straining your body. The oldest person on Earth, Jean Calment, died at the age of 122. And by her own admission, she never got sick. Like at all. Well, she had several injuries, plus bad habits, so who knows? Maybe if not for them, Madame Calment would have lived to 150. See you later.